We're at one of the most important sites really in American history, and this is the site of the Battle of Antietam. Took place on September 17th, 1862. In this area, we're right coming up to the visitor center right here. And we're going to talk today about some of the stuff that happened at the Battle of Antietam and why it's so important in American history. So we're walking over to the Dunkard Church here from the visitor center. And as we move over there, talk a little bit about the importance of the Battle of Antietam. I might call it the Battle of Antietam Creek. So the North named the battles after bodies of water, usually creek, such as Bull Run, which in the South is named the Battle of Manassas. So the South actually called this battle the Battle of Sharpsburg. But before this battle, the South had had some success at the Second Battle of Manassas, or Second Battle of Bull Run. And Lee made the decision to cross the Potomac from Virginia into Maryland and take the fight to the north. And so this was where he came when he crossed the Potomac, which is not far from here. So Lee had about 40,000 troops. Here's another one of the monuments. Hard to read this one. Oh, this is the Ohio. This is monument to the Ohio Regiment, 5th, 66th, and 7th. So Lee, as I said, had about 40,000 troops, and the North had about 80,000 troops here. So the North had certainly an advantage. But the hope that Lee had and the South had was that there was a lot of sympathy for the Confederates in Maryland, and they had hoped that when they crossed over into Maryland, there'd be a groundswell of support for the Confederate cause. That actually did not end up happening, but that was what they had hoped would happen. This is the Dunkard Church. This is the site of some of the fiercest fighting of the battle. This is not the original church. The original church was destroyed and rebuilt, and so this is what the church would have looked like pretty much, but this is not in fact the original church. So, a couple reasons why Antietam is so important in American history. One is that it was the bloodiest battle in American history. There were something like 24,000 casualties here. And to put that into perspective, that is a lot more than the American casualties in the entirety of the Revolutionary War, which I suppose has to do with both the fact that there were more men involved in the Civil War, and also the fact that technology was better. better in the sense of being able to kill more people. See, across the road there is another monument, which we'll go take a look at. But another reason that it's very important is that the European powers, France and Great Britain, had considered recognizing the Confederate States as a separate country and perhaps coming to their aid. And what kind of stopped that was that the Union, although it was kind of a draw here mostly, the Union Army was able to repulse the attack of the Confederates. And what that did was gave Lincoln the ability to go ahead and issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which of course freed the slaves starting on January 1st, 1863. A lot of wind today. So once Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, because the European powers were opposed to slavery, and the war had been made essentially about slavery by the Emancipation Proclamation, there was no chance at that point that the European powers would recognize the Confederate States or give them any aid. So that was very, very important there. In fact, you might say that considering the advantages that the Union had, without aid from the European powers, the Confederacy perhaps had no chance at that point. This is the monument to the forces from Maryland. You can see his 1st Maryland Artillery, 2nd Maryland Infantry, 2nd Regiment, Maryland Infantry. So here we are at the sunken road, which is still sunken, as you can tell. This was where a lot of the soldiers were killed. Where some of the monuments are. It's a little dark, but we are down in a little bit of a ditch here. This is where some of the most famous photos taken by an associate of Matthew Brady were taken, which I will try to put in here. This is a monument to Pennsylvania, 132 Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. Well, it says 1 brigade, 3 divisions, 2 corps. You can see the tower there in the distance, and at the visitor center it said that was constructed around the turn of the century, and it was sort of used partly as a classroom for studying the battle. Not a classroom per se, but for putting people up there to be able to see the entirety of the battle area from one place. Certainly is interesting. It says Bloody Lane Trail there. Certainly is interesting to juxtapose this really beautiful setting here in Maryland with the carnage that occurred here a little over 150 years ago. 160 years ago, I think. Right, 162 years ago. Very quiet now, but certainly a very hellish place 162 years ago. There's some information about the battle here. Another monument. It's a monument to Delaware. It's interesting, some of the border states, such as Maryland, had divisions in both the Union Army and the Confederate Army. And sometimes they actually fought against each other. Since this channel is Adventures in a Silver Tesla, we have to put the Silver Tesla in the video. This is the Silver Tesla at Antietam. I don't know if you can see, but my license plate is slightly akimbo here because a couple of months ago, well, slightly tilted. A couple of months ago, I ran into a deer, just sort of obliquely, and all it did was knock the license plate off, but it's a little crooked. This is the path down to Antietam Creek and the Burnside Bridge. That is the Burnside Bridge there. This heights up here would have been where the Confederates were entrenched. At this bridge there was something like 600 casualties. So there were only, they said in the movie at the visitor center, only about 50 Confederates holding these heights. And there were several thousand Union soldiers trying to get across. This is the Antietam, the creek there is the Antietam Creek that the battle is named after. Pretty creek. Pretty little creek here. Antietam Creek. Very pleasant now, not so pleasant 162 years ago. Here's looking back up to the heights across the bridge. I guess this is the original bridge, at least the sides, not the pavement. The pavement is new. Of course, in Maryland and Virginia, there are many battle sites, especially in Virginia, since the war was fought primarily in the South, but also in Maryland and Pennsylvania. It's a good thing for people to come and view, I think. This is what happens when a country can't stay united, can't stay together. And perhaps we can learn from the past